So good evening, or good morning, and welcome to today's webinar, which has been kindly organised by India Didactic Association. My name is Felicity Gillespie, coming to you from a grey and rather chilly London, and I ran a charity for early years education in the UK, Kindred Squared, and I'm also an advisor to the UK government on governance of K-12 schools. It's my absolute pleasure to be facilitating this conversation for you today with 7 young people aged 12 to 17 from 4 different continents. I would say we've got a group of average teenagers to hear from, but I think you'll agree when you've met them that there's really nothing average about any of them. They're a pretty remarkable bunch. The purpose of this webinar is to give professionals in the educational field, policymakers, educators, and of course parents, the opportunity to hear from young people from around the world about their experience of learning in lockdown. We may be analysing the data, looking at student progress, taking a view about how well we think online learning is working. But what's it like to be a young teenager, kept away from your friends and school, and suddenly learning in a totally new way? What's working? What's fun? And what isn't so great? What are they missing most from their educational experience? And then the part I think we're all going to enjoy the most, I'm going to ask each of them to take on the mantle of Minister of Education in their own country just for the day, and to share with us how, taking the lessons from this lockdown experience, they would change the education model in their countries when the pandemic is over and normal life hopefully resumes. Without further ado, I'd like to hand over to the young people themselves. And to kick things off, I'm going to ask each of you to introduce yourselves briefly when I call on you, and to tell everybody a bit about yourselves, where you are, and how you've been learning in lockdown. So we're going to start with a hop, skip and a jump from London over to Singapore and to Annika. So good evening, Annika. How are you? And tell us about your lockdown.
Hi, everyone. My name is Annika. I'm 17 years of age. I will be entering grade 12 in August at UWC Dover in Singapore. I've been living here for almost 15 years now. So in Singapore, the COVID-19 cases started emerging in January. However, the lockdown was only imposed on 7th April due to rising cases. My school preponed our Easter holiday due to the pandemic, and we began virtual classes from the 6th of April. Throughout this time, we've been stuck at home, distancing from our friends and extended family. Wearing a mask and maintaining social distancing outside our homes has become the norm ever since. As both my parents are working from home, each of us found our secluded individual sweet spot in the house to work independently from. Overall, it's been an overwhelming experience, especially because we are not so used to being restricted at home in isolation for so long. And we are all very thankful that the quarantine here has ended on the 19th of June, but with some restriction in its first phase.
Thank you, Annika. Let's pop over to the UAE and to Fatemeh. Hello, Fatemeh. How are you?
Hello, I'm fine. Greetings to everybody. I'm Fatemeh Ahmed, and I live in the United Arab Emirates in the Emirate of Ras Al Khaimah. And I study in Scholars Indian School, which follows the CBSE curriculum. And I'm in my 11th grade, and I'm a commerce student. Here in the UAE, the lockdown started from mid-March, and it ended this last week. And of course, we had our school. We started our school in mid-April, and this week, 2nd of July, will be our first day of summer break. And of course, we had to continue our schooling online. So we follow Microsoft Teams and a test portal for our assessments. And the Microsoft Teams is for our live classes, as well as assignments too. Thank you.
Let's spin round and go to Canada and to Sterling, who has bravely got up the earliest of all of you. It's very early in the morning, I know, Sterling, but it's lovely to have you. Tell us about your lockdown.
Hi, my name is Sterling, and I'm a 15-year-old student living in a small town in Ontario called Oakville, which is right beside Lake Ontario, roughly an hour drive away from Toronto. I just finished the 9th grade from Appleby College, and I'll be moving into the 10th in September. I've been doing online school since late March, and just 2 weeks after regular school was going to open after March break. Likewise, the town has been in a state of emergency for around 3 months and has been reopening gradually since early June. Our province has this planned set recovery, and it's in 3 stages, with us currently being in stage 2, which opens some like outdoor activity areas like parks and restaurants. Ideally, the state of emergency will end early July for us, since most of those that were infected in the town have been cured, and there have been increasingly less cases, less new cases for the past couple of weeks. Physical distancing is still very respected, particularly when going on walks and outdoor activities, which more and more people are doing. And personal protective equipment like masks and gloves are also usually worn by most people when they're running errands or grocery shopping. The lockdown for me didn't really affect my free time schedule or my hobbies, since I'm not really an outdoors person. Although I like to be in others' company, I'm fine with just being on my own, since I always find ways to keep myself busy. In addition, most of my hobbies can be done alone. However, lockdown has had some pretty big impacts, both good and bad, on my education, which I'll get to later.
Great, thank you. So we're going to come back to Europe briefly, to our youngest participant, Aaryan, who's in Estonia. Hello, Aaryan.
Hello, my name is Aaryan and I'm 12 years old. I currently study in Tallinn European School in 8th grade. Well, I'm going to 8th grade. I live in Tallinn, Estonia. I am also a founder of a company called eCrashers. Lockdown here had started at 16th March, and then the emergency has ended at 17th March. Yeah, it's over. The things at first seemed easy, and it was like a holiday where you could only stay home. But sadly, things started spiraling down. Estonia saw a rise of the virus within a few days from 3 cases. From 3 cases to having the world's most infected per million population. Everyone was scared, although as students, we rejoiced with the school closure. Our government was quick to implement strict restrictions and were able to control coronavirus. For the last few days, the number of daily new cases has been very low and not exceeded 1. We can now travel and enjoy our summer vacations with the countries in the travel bubble. We even joke about the fact that Estonians were upset since they already maintained a 5-meter apart rule. But during the pandemic, the government asked us to maintain a 2-meter distance. Schools were shut here on 16th March, but resumed online classes within a week. As a digital nation, we were better prepared to handle such a situation since we already had a learning platform called ECO, which was in use for all schools.
I don't want to stop you in mid-flow, Aaryan, but I'm just conscious of the time. We're going to keep going. We want to hear more about your entrepreneurship maybe later on when you're talking about what you've been doing in lockdown. That would be great. So we're going to go to India now, to Aadya. And Aadya, I think it was actually your idea to even have this whole webinar, to get the student voice introduced into the conversation about the impact of learning in lockdown on the future of education policy. So yes, when you're talking about your situation, it would be lovely if you could maybe talk a bit about why you think this is a really important thing to be doing.
I will do that, ma'am, for sure. So hello everyone, my name is Aadya Gupta. I'm 15 years old from Delhi, India, and I'm a student in grade 10 at Modern School, Barakhamba Road. So India was in a state of a very stringent lockdown, which was nationwide from mid-March, which lasted for about 2 months. And currently India is not in a nationwide lockdown. In fact, we are in phase 2 of opening up, although a few states and areas that have a higher concentration of the COVID-19 cases do have lockdowns imposed. The concern is that the cases are now on a rapid increase and the lockdowns have to be eased due to economic pressure and the balancing of lives and livelihoods. with reference to the online classes, yes, we have been having them regularly in most private schools. Our online school began a week after the lockdown was announced, and that is also the time when our normal session starts, usually in school post-examinations. So the timings for the classes virtually have been the same as the school hours for my school specifically. So as far as efficiency in starting and the flow of the online classes go, I think we've been pretty much on track with that. However, the opening of the educational institutions of all schools and colleges has been kept on hold at least till the end of July and more if required. Now coming to what ma'am asked me. So why I wanted to do this web conversation was because I had been seeing everywhere that there were so many webinars being held of adults, educators, principals, government officials, everybody. And there was so much of it related to education. But I don't think there was any place where I saw that students could express their views about how they felt about the current system of education, especially with the online programs. So this is why I felt that it was really important that there can be principals and schools and governments who can take our opinion into consideration, and it could possibly better the situation of online schooling, which is why I had thought of the entire idea. And then the entire idea of having people from all across the world, of course, would be absolutely amazing. So that's where it originated from.
I have to say, I'm of the generation, Aadya, where I am amazed that I'm looking at all of you from all across the world at the same time. For you guys, I think this is quite, it's not so surprising, the technology, but for my generation, it's amazing and it's really wonderful. But thank you for having the idea, because I think this is going to be a really interesting conversation.
Thank you.
So without more ado, let's go to Ghana. Let's go to Africa and talk to Christian. Christian, over to you.
Hi everyone, my name is Christian Adi. I'm 15. I'm in grade 11. Most probably I'll go to grade 12 when I have to go back to school. Lockdown in Ghana started in mid-March. That was when students were asked to come home and everything started slowing down. And the president declared a partial lockdown on 3 towns, Accra, Kumasi, and Takoradi, for 2 weeks, and then he extended it for another 2 weeks before he put us into total lockdown. That was for 1 month. And around here, things have started loosening up. Businesses have reopened. The final year students in university, SHS and JHS have gone back to school to resume their studies so that they can complete. And the government is making sure that strict measures are taken so that everyone is protected. And they are going to start the voters register in a few days, just a side thing to show how life has come back to normal here. And for me, it hasn't really affected me because when I was in school, I used to prep. Even though we are not really doing any school classes or anything, I used to learn on my own in school. So I'm able to do that at home on my own, even though it's a little bit hard because you are in your house and everybody has to do their own thing. So you have to stay confined to your room and everything.
That's great to hear. So we're going to end with a return back from around the world, back to England, and to Jonathan, who's in Milton Keynes in England. Hi, Jonathan.
Hello. I am a 15-year-old boy in a little town called Milton Keynes, about 50 miles from the head of the capital of England, London. And we went on our lockdown about March the 23rd, and we've been getting updates about every 3 weeks. And the lockdown is slowly starting to ease. a lot of schools actually have opened for some students to go back if their parents are going back to work and they can't actually get any other education. Online classes have started though. They started roughly about a month ago, and we've just been learning with our teachers. Obviously, I found it hard to concentrate at home because I don't have the teachers' help. And but yeah, I'll get more onto that later. But it's slowly opening, businesses are opening again, and yeah, it's slowly easing out of lockdown.
So here we all are, you've all been in lockdown for about the same amount of time, it sounds, and you're all beginning to come out of lockdown. And I think it would be great to hear from you if there have been any positives about being in lockdown, generally, but specifically in terms of your education and your learning journey. So let's go in a different order. Let's go back to Canada and ask Sterling. Sterling, has there been anything positive you can say about what it's been like learning in lockdown?
Definitely. There was, for my school at least, it was a pretty smooth transition into online school. Our school luckily has always used Office 365 programs, primarily OneNote, to learn as well as submit assignments rather than using paper. Since all of the lessons were in OneNote, usually had the same pages that were projected in class, which usually contained all the steps, information, editable homework that we needed to learn and do on our own. The process of learning and submitting didn't really change. Teachers would correct, check, and mark the homework that we did every week, as well as the assignments or summatives like essays or big projects, which we could see in our online notebooks. They would also give reminders and emails if we didn't complete something. It made the transition go much more well. In addition, the fact that there was like no commute time and no uniform requirements for the Zoom calls was also a plus. This actually leads me to another positive, how the classes were set up on Zoom. They were only 30 minutes long and there were 15-minute breaks in between each one. Most teachers had like one call per week where they would go over the homework, give instructions for the week, kind of skim over the necessary lessons to complete, as well as reminders for any upcoming assignments and leave us to do the learning and work by ourselves. This allowed for a much more flexible learning schedule where we could learn and do our work at our own pace, as well as allowing more time for extended learning and beyond and above assignments. For example, I'm a pretty slow writer, so writing essays has always been a challenge, but with more time to think and do the work, I was able to stress less about it. As for some other teachers, which for me were my language courses, which were the most interactive courses back in regular school, we would have Zoom calls for every lesson and guide us completely through everything, have practices, Q&As with the students, and dialogues during the calls. We had 45 classes every day, depending on the weekday, with classes always ending at 12:15 p.m. If we had any questions, we would use Microsoft Teams to message our teachers. But this is also kind of a negative since the back and forth type of questions that occur organically in the classroom could not really occur. There was also the huge change to project-based learning instead of exams and tests. I know some of my peers prefer the latter, but for me, I enjoy taking my time with work and displaying what I've learned with a lengthier time limit. Another positive for me, I think, would be the weekly reflections we all had to complete in the OneNote, where we talked about what went well, what we had accomplished, and what were some challenges, as well as any questions or feedback that we have for the teacher. Yeah, I feel like those were the major pros of learning in lockdown.
That's a lot of pros. That's great. Let's go to Fatemeh. What were the positives, if there were any, for you?
So for everything, there is positive side and a negative side. And for this lockdown also, there is a positive side, as I think there is more balance in our lives than before, like between our education and the skills which we like to develop, our things like which we like to learn apart from school, our school learning. So now in our school, we had technology use, but not too much as now. Now it's like the education is totally technology dependent. Like our assessments, assignments, everything is depending on technology. And I think this makes education a bit more creative and interesting at the same time. So before, like, there was a stress from school, like that daily tiring routine of going to school and coming back. I think that made us tired to look at ourselves like now. Now we don't have that tiring routine. So we can look at ourselves a bit more and develop our skills. So I think that's a very positive point for me.
How long does it take you to get to school? I'm interested when you say that the routine of going to school. Are you going a long way to get to school?
It's around 20 minutes.
Okay.
Like going and coming, and you know, the bus and things like that. It makes you tired.
That's great. I wonder if it's the same in Ghana. Christian, what's the positives been in Ghana, if there've been any?
The positives for me about lockdowns, I've been able to develop myself outside the classroom. I've been able to focus more on myself. I've started cooking. I've started reading inspirational books. I've started doing a lot of new things. And I've also been able to increase the number of hours I can spend learning on myself. So those are the positives for me.
What kind of skills have you been learning? What are these new skills? Are they courses or are they reading? What have you been doing with that extra time?
I've been cooking. I've been binge watching shows. I've been doing research on environmental pollution and a lot of things.
Great. Aadya, what are the positives been for you in India?
So, although being in a state of lockdown and not being able to go to school and meet my friends has been very gloomy for me, it has also given me the time to think on various aspects, which I believe we always take for granted everything in our lives. And this gave me so much time to think that we should take care and value what we have to continue having what we need and what we want. And it has also given me so much time to get an opportunity to work on my old skills and then also learn tons of new ones. In terms of my education, I think one of the most positive things is that our learning continued and we started our academic year and the course is getting completed. And if I had no online classes, I would have been extremely non-productive and at times very demotivated. Another really good thing was that our school started at 8 a.m. and finished at 1:30, along with a lunch break in the middle. This not only helped me get a sense of normalcy, but also helped me get into a proper routine. And one of the best part was that we have been connected with our teachers and friends in some way. I mean, although it is nothing like meeting them in person, it's great to see that we're still being able to keep in touch. And I know that if these small virtual interactions had also not been there, I would have felt so isolated, and I would have felt like I'm living inside my own box. Also, it was great to see our teachers operating so much technology and our students getting the opportunity to experience a new way of learning and something that we never did before. So the online system has given us an opportunity to learn at our own pace and use reference material and videos to help us understand, which has been really helpful for me especially. Now my teachers have also been sending us typed out notes so that during the actual online lessons, we only have to listen, which helps us understand and absorb way better compared to earlier when we would have to write all the notes side by side while the teacher was explaining. So although it is not the same as going to school at all, but I felt that there are definitely so many positives in continuing with education online.
It's really interesting. Okay, before we go to the last three of you, does anybody want to just ask those first four contributors any questions about the positives that they've identified?
Yeah, I have a question for Christian. I've heard that they have had radio programs to teach.
Yes, but that's for the GHS students for grade 8, 9, no, grade 7, 8, and 9. And for grade 9 and lower.
Do you think it works?
Then,
Sorry, Aaron, you can go.
So yeah, my question is the same. How is it like? I mean, do you know someone else who had gone through the radio learning system?
no.
Well, let's go on to Christian, because Christian, you've had a slightly different experience, I believe, in terms of your engagement's been more over WhatsApp. Is that right? Tell us about the positives of that.
Yes. The WhatsApp, the pros of the WhatsApp is that you have to put in more effort. For me and my friends, we like to procrastinate a lot, because when we get projects, they'll normally leave a project for about 4 weeks, and it will start being done 3 days to submission. So for that, we've had to put in a lot of effort, and it has been hard for some of them. You see people complaining a lot about that.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. So Annika in Singapore, what have the positives been for you?
I'd like to start by mentioning, like, similar to Sterling, I was fortunate enough to have been exposed to online learning platforms from the very beginning of school. For us, each student from grade 6 onwards has their own laptop, and we use online platforms such as Teamy and other portals for regular classes, assignments, and homework submissions, because it's always been a part of our school culture. In terms of learning, I also have a lot of pros and cons to talk about. To start on a positive note, I think my school handled the situation really well. We maintained our timetable with virtual classes from 8:10 to 3 p.m. and we used Google Meet. So we would sign in to the video call every lesson, where the teacher would either take us through the lesson while working and sharing notes on their iPad, just like they would do on a whiteboard in the physical classroom, or they would give us instructions for the week and allow us to sign off and complete the work ourselves. So this gave us the flexibility of doing work at our own pace, which was personally quite helpful for me, because for some classes I take more time to learn. We were set to have exams in the mid-April, which got canceled. So instead we continued the curriculum for all of our subjects. The e-learning in general was very teacher dependent. Some teachers shared a lot of resources and made YouTube videos to explain certain elements of the topic to us, which was really helpful. And others would leave the learning to be student dependent. So it depended on your own motivation and like interest in the subject. For tests, our teachers found a website called exam.net, which allowed us to answer questions and prevented us from searching up the answers. So they used it as an effective tool to understand how we were doing in each topic. But the main difference, of course, was the social interaction, which we dearly missed at school.
I think when we talk about some of the challenges in a minute, I think that lack of interaction is going to be something that we hear from, not just from Singapore, but from others too. Thank you very much. Let's go to Estonia. Aaryan, what have the positives been like for you?
There were quite a few. Well, at first it was chaotic, and every teacher in the school was trying to ensure their students would be able to learn and that the learning didn't stop. But it was still chaotic. Then we had learned the power of technology, and things started becoming easier. As students, we realized that we had a lot of time on our hands, and as the time for commuting to school and recess and breaks and all of that was free time, basically. We definitely missed some of the times where our where our friends would ask the teachers some silly questions to waste time, or just talking with my friends. That's kind of part and parcel of life. I myself have spent quite some time learning different things like web designing, and I've talked to a lot of people who've also learned many different things. Yeah, I also was able to use this time to kind of make my company grow because I could do different things like social media. Which brings me to my next point. A lot of children started spending time on social media, and frankly, teachers will also think of doing something on social media, but that would not be very professional.
Thank you. And last but by no means least, let's come back to England again and go to Jonathan.
Yeah, so I thought there was many positives. Obviously, I think in England as well, no one really knew how bad this lockdown was going to be and how long we would actually be indoors. But I think we've explored new ways of learning, obviously through online technology. We use Google Classroom, which is an app made by Google where you can share work and talk to your teacher on there, which is quite good. Show My Homework as well, which we have used, which is an app that basically allows you to get work from your teacher and you have to complete it. We've been given exams, and actually as the lockdown eases, we were able to go into school and talk with our teachers for about 15 minutes and actually take exams and then go home and complete them. I also think it's been good as well because we've been learning new skills. Obviously, I wouldn't normally do a lot of things I've been doing in lockdown. Like I've been cooking, I've been cleaning, which obviously I sometimes do, but I've been doing it more as, you know, I don't have much to do as well in lockdown. We've been having a lot more free time to think about ourselves. Yeah, thank you.
I'm really struck by how you're 12 to 17, you're from 4 different continents, you've all got different family situations, different learning stages in your journeys, but actually there's so much consistency, isn't there, about what you're talking about, that there's more flexibility in the way and the timing of your learning. There's more opportunity to reflect on your own likes and wants and situation. You're learning new skills because you have more time, and that there's much more opportunity to learn the things that you want to learn. So in a way, it's a way of making your learning more personalized. And it's interesting that all of you said sort of the same things. I just wonder, if we've got a few minutes, if any of you have any questions for each other about what you've been learning, or about whether you've found that the extra time has always been a sort of positive thing, and what you've been doing with that time in terms of learning new skills, or anything else.
I have a question for Annika, actually.
Yeah, Aadya.
So you said that there are a bunch of classes you have which are student dependent. I was wondering first, why didn't get student dependent, and also how do you find motivation to go about something which is very student dependent, like you said?
So I can give the example of my economics class. For us, I think I would say our teacher wasn't very interested in the online learning, which I guess is normal. So he would give us an assignment, which was something like do these 10 mark, 12, 15 mark essay questions, and work on it as in groups and discuss your answers, and then write a full answer and then submit it 2 weeks later. So he wouldn't have anything to check in with throughout the 2 weeks, because he would give us an assignment to complete for the next week. So that meant that we had to find our own time in the lesson, as well as, because it was an assignment that was longer than just class time, so we'd have to find our own time to do it as well. And then working in groups means calling your friends and discussing, which we all get distracted and end up talking about other things and not schoolwork. So for me, because it is one of my weaker subjects, I do feel the need to put in extra time. So I managed to do it by myself and actually put in the effort. But I know some of my friends were just fooling around and wasted time. And the thing is, it really depends on the teacher for these online classes, because some teachers might have taken it seriously and been like, okay, you gotta get this done next week that if you didn't get it done by now. But my teacher didn't really say anything, and that's why I was talking about it being student dependent if the teacher lets you go off and do your own thing, because it's based on your motivation and your work, your hard work is the result of what you get from the end of virtual learning.
So I'm really glad somebody mentioned teachers. I'd like to ask you all a question, which is, do you think that the new way of learning, where teachers send you PowerPoints or send you notes in some cases, or just have to prepare in advance before they project and give you the lesson, do you think that's changed the quality of the teaching? Is it better? Is it worse? Or is it about the same? Anyone got any thoughts about the quality of teaching?
I mean, for me, it just stayed the same. They were still very consistent, and they were pretty good at what they were doing. Of course, it was tough for everyone to adapt to the new things, but they covered up for it.
For me also, I think it has been better rather.
Anyone else?
Because I think it's been better, definitely, because not only do we have the book to refer to during the lesson, we can also refer to the teacher's PPT that she's probably sharing. So I definitely found it better, that aspect.
I know for me, it has been around the same because we've always been using OneNote, so all the stuff is on the lesson. And for me, that makes it so much more easier if I want to go back and see whatever things I kind of don't understand. And also it makes note writing for tests and stuff much more easier.
Jonathan, what's your experience been in England? Because I know that you've had less Zoom lessons than maybe some of the others.
Yeah, we only started Zoom lessons actually a few weeks ago. And before then, we were just getting given homework kind of to do, but obviously more of it. It was slightly less than an average school day. I'd say probably about 3 hours a day of actually homework to do. So I think we've obviously given some more time. What my school have done, they've given us time to obviously think about ourselves and then also do work on the side, because obviously you're stuck at home, you're in a new environment, it's a lot different. And you're not used to it. You're not used to learning at home, obviously, if you're going to school. So I think they're just given like a bit less so you can focus on yourself more as well, which I think is good.
Okay. Anybody else want to ask anyone a question about the positives?
Oh, I just had something to add to your question. For our school, I think it made a distinct separation between teachers who are really passionate about their subject and other teachers, because online learning allowed us to get resources that were broken down into sections, because of course the teacher can be there to explain it to you in person. So we got instructions that were step by step, so it actually allowed us to go through the topics one at a time slowly, and also allowed us to go back and revise it if we had any troubles. So I thought that was very helpful, but of course it's always teacher dependent, just like it is student dependent.
Yeah, so it makes the good are even better, and the ones that are less passionate are less inspiring. So actually, let's think now about, sorry, who was that?
Oh, that was me.
Who was that?
Sterling.
Go ahead, Sterling.
I was going to ask Jonathan about the whole exam process thing, because that's very interesting. How did that work for your school?
So do you mean going in to collect the exams or doing the exams?
Like, yeah, how was the process?
So it wasn't like our actual final exams. It was kind of like a practice type. So we went into school one day because obviously they messaged all of us to go into school, and we spoke with a teacher. We had to stay apart from like 2 meters apart, and we had a little, because obviously social distancing, so we had to have a talk from far away, and they just told us and asked us if we were getting on okay at home and how we found it. And then this is where they discussed to us about introducing Zoom lessons, because we hadn't actually started it at that point. And then now they've actually introduced Zoom lessons. I find it a lot easier because you can communicate with your teacher as well. But yeah, and then they had the tests, and then they just handed them out as you went out the door.
And so were they like for like marks? Because I'm assuming Was it like an open book test, something like that?
No, it wasn't. It was actually, it's not supposed to be. I think they have more trust in us. Obviously, not always. People can cheat, actually. But I think it's just for the good of your learning as well. It's the fact that, obviously, it doesn't go towards a final grade. It's like a practice paper. So it's for the good of your learning rather than the good of your actual grade.
My daughters also had to sign an honour pledge about doing tests at home. So they were all sent their end of year exams and they had to sign a pledge that they wouldn't cheat. And I guess there was the opportunity, if you wanted to cheat, you could. But as it was part of your own learning journey, I guess the school was hoping that people would respect that and take the code, as it were, protect the code. So let's get real. Let's talk about the challenges, because I don't believe you're all so wonderfully positive and articulate about the great things about the flexibility and the more time for reflection and how you're all working so hard. But I'm afraid to say I don't believe a word of it. I'm sure there have been moments where you've thought, this is really tough. So what are those moments like, and what triggers, what aspects of your online learning have made you feel, gosh, I wish I could go back to school? Let's start with Fatemeh. What's it been like for you?
Lack of socialization is really not good, especially for students. Students must socialize, interact with other students, teachers, and other people at school. So lack of socialization just affects us, our personality, our communication, our feelings. You know, interacting with friends and teachers really makes us feel good, really helps us in our studies. I think that's the worst part of the whole thing, like lack of socialization. And then comes, of course, the change in the environment of learning. School is an environment meant for learning. When you go to the school, your intention, your focus is on learning. But at home, it's like, it feels weird a little bit, like you're learning and focusing at the class and the teacher in your own room. So I think that's difficult too. But I think lack of socialization is the most important point and the worst one.
Yeah, I think I feel for all of you. You're too young to be away from your friends. Christian, what's it been like for you? What are the biggest challenges for you been?
My situation has been very, very bad, especially because I go to a boarding school where you're, from waking up to sleeping, you are completely concerned about learning. When I come home, it is free. And now my because I'm old enough, I'm 15, my parents can leave me and my siblings at home alone for 3-4 days. Will be okay. And when lockdown started, then before I continue, let me just say that education system has a very low amount of technology in it. So coming home means that now the learning has sort of stopped. It's now up to you to do the learning yourself. So lack of motivations has been a challenge. And at home, everything is a challenge. Everything calls you, from exercise, social media, to cleaning up your room. In fact, because I enjoy clean places, I don't like a place to be very dirty. So everything is a challenge for me, and it's especially hard to learn subjects that I don't like, because there are already challenges, and you're also learning something that you don't like, so it's sort of aggravated.
So you need a lot more self-discipline and self-motivation when you don't have teachers and a schedule, I guess. So
Yes.
Aaryan, what's it like in Estonia? What have your biggest challenges been?
So, online learning at the start of it was not pleasant for me at all. Our private schools struggled to go online, and the teachers were left to manage things themselves, which made us access various different platforms for various subjects. We weren't able to organize our things. There were too many different things we had to visit. Heavy online classes made me realize that I didn't have time at the start to enjoy with my family. I'm very tired one of those days. At the end of those days, Wednesday. Then you'd constantly get this thing. You'd constantly think that, let me put this in a saying: all play and no work makes Jack a dumb boy, but all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. And I was feeling more of the second kind, doing a lot of work, but being dull because I couldn't really play. Luckily for us, the school was quick in taking feedback from students and parents, and then we used Microsoft Teams, which simplified their lives. It also brought up the fact that our teachers needed a better inclusion of ICT in the lesson plans, and the school should have ensured that they were trained on it too. While Estonia has the highest PISA scores in Europe, topping in financial literacy, I still feel that schools and teachers need to implement ICT better to ensure that we are truly future ready. Online classes did not guarantee that students understood everything. Many of us were still doubtful even after the classes. And honestly, it was very easy for us to cheat in tests. The teachers tried their best. They came up with innovative ideas such as keep your camera on, but cheating is still very easy, and that is one of the things, especially in the subject math. A lot of people don't like math. I really don't understand why, but so Instagram and so social media was a major platform where they started kind of cheating, let's say, and there was a lot of texts, and then I was like, why don't I help these people that give me my company? So not entirely negative. Yeah.
It's the isolation, isn't it? Annika, what's it been like in Singapore? What are the challenges for you been?
For me personally, I think that the fact that the load of work that was expected from us remained the same was a bit unfair. So if we didn't finish work in class, we would be expected to finish it in our own time, which usually wouldn't be the case. Usually if we didn't finish work in class, we would be able to do it in the next class. So just increase the amount of time we spend doing home lesson work. Some virtual classes for some subjects weren't really interesting, so it made a lot of students drift off during the middle of the lesson. I know that some people used to turn off their camera and just go lie down on the couch or lie down in their bed and really just pretend like they're listening, but they're actually not there. For me, I felt kind of alone in this journey with little to no interaction with my friends. Of course, I did call them very often. I would spend 3 hours at night talking to my friends on the phone, but it's not the same as seeing them in person. So my motivation level really went down drastically, which made it a challenge to keep up with deadlines for different assignments and stuff. The pace at which teachers were teaching also remained the same, which meant that if you didn't understand something, you had to go back and do it in your own time. So some topics were covered in one lesson with loads of assignments to complete for the next lesson, so you would have to do it in your own time. For me specifically, because I'm a student of grade 11, there were a lot more things piled up for university applications, which have to be sent out this year in October. So usually if we were at school, we would get a lot more guidance, be able to see our university advisor for information and advice on what to do and how to prepare. But that was a bit difficult because of this virtual meetings that we used to have. But overall, I missed my friends quite a lot because I think, like Fatemeh said, like group study and group interactions is really important at school. I'm so used to studying with my friends to keep them company, keep me company. It's like the perfect little group for us to get work done, but also spend time with each other and stay motivated. So that was really, it was something that I really, really missed about school. But other than that, I'm a very active person in extracurricular activities. I play a lot of sports. I also am the leader of this group for a non-governmental organization in India, actually. And it was difficult to hold meetings because of the fact that we weren't able to see each other. So, and our fundraising also got postponed. So we didn't even meet our goal for fundraising this year, which was a bit of a letdown, especially because it would be helping such a good mission. So this virtual online learning really affected a lot of different aspects of school, not only the learning, but also the social interactions and the student-led groups that we have for different things. So overall, it was kind of a massive hit on so many different aspects of school.
It's really interesting, isn't it? It's motivation and it's also mood. It's motivation to learn, I think, has been hit, but also how you feel in yourselves as a result of not having that motivation and not having your friends around. I hear you. Okay, Aadya, what's your experience been like of the challenges?
Okay, so like I said before, online education helped us continue learning, had its positive, but it's nothing at all like being in school. I'm someone who's always loved going to school, but this lockdown has made me realize that not only do I love it, I really miss it. There have been a few challenges that I've been facing due to online lessons. The first of which was that an online class can never replace physically being in a classroom, especially the environment that we create in that class. And there was definitely a lack of connect that we students and teachers had with each other, which I think would only come when we meet face to face. Then, like Fatemeh said, there was a lot of lack of interaction in class. And simply because I think the teacher was only being able to entertain one child's query at a given point of time. Although sometimes it was really funny that 10 of us would be asking questions at the same time and nobody was heard eventually. So that was definitely a problem. Also, there was a significant increase in our screen time. And even for me and a lot of my friends too, it has led to so much strain on our eyes. It's like when we're working, we're on our laptops and our phones. When we're relaxing, we're on our TVs. So we just don't get rid of the screen. And then, of course, like Annika said, we really miss being around our friends, and which is such an important part of going to school, I believe. The fun games, group projects, team sports, co-curricular activities, social interactions, all of that is, I think, what I miss most. And I think that that's so important because it teaches us so many values and builds our attitude. And I think that can only be instilled in us when we are in that classroom and are able to build an emotional bond with everybody. And this lack of social skills have definitely led to a change in behavioral patterns and attitudes with so many people who I know in my school. And lastly, one of the major drawbacks is that through online education, we were only being able to get theoretical knowledge and from the book, and we're not being able to get the opportunity of experiential learning and actually implementing what we've learned into our real life. So I think those were some of the major drawbacks that I thought.
I'm amazed at how articulate you all are. It's incredible to be talking about those challenges in such a vivid way. It's really powerful. Jonathan, what's it been like in England with you? What are the challenges for you been? Because you're very sporty, aren't you? Have you missed out on that?
Yeah, so I do like to go outside quite a bit and play football. Obviously, as the lockdown has eased in England, you can go outside more. So I could kick around with my family. But obviously it's not as good as playing a team sport, competitive. So it's been hard, especially I found learning hard as well, concentrating as well, because obviously you're in a home environment and you're not at school. School's made for learning, home's made for like relaxing after school. So it's different. You've got a different mindset. And also I found communicating with teachers harder as well, especially at the start of lockdown, especially no one really knew what was going on. So we had homework set, so we couldn't actually talk to the teacher in person. We weren't on a Zoom call. We weren't speaking to them. And there was no kind of timetable. I felt like it was do what you want when you want, which for some people works. But for someone like me, obviously I could set my own timetable. But it's the fact that I don't need to do it at a certain time makes me not concentrate as much. Which is kind of strange, but I also find speaking with friends about a lesson can reinforce it in your head as well after the lesson. If you speak with your friends about it, which obviously you can't exactly do now because you can all be learning different stuff at different times. So it's very confusing. I found it, hard.
Okay, thank you. Sterling, let's end with you. Let's go back to Canada. What were the challenges like for you?
Challenges, basically everybody have covered the main ones, or mine ones at least. My main challenge was time management. When going to regular school, it can drag on for such a long time, which in my case puts a special kind of urgency on the homework that we need to do. For example, getting home at 6 after co-curriculars and clubs and eating a quick dinner before getting started on the load of homework that's due tomorrow, and trying to get a good night's sleep in. But in contrast with online school, it ends so much earlier and we only see most of our teachers once a week, which in my case gives me a false sense of relaxation. In my head, I think since I'm stuck at home all day, I have all the time in the world to do my work. And with the internet and social media being such a distraction and a black hole, you can think things like, oh, just one more episode or just 5 minutes more. It's kind of fascinating how quickly this lengthy amount of time shortens down. I remember the first couple of weeks of online school, when we were doing our first big assignments, it was a big shock how quickly the time went by, and before I knew it, the deadline was tomorrow. Especially since it was the end of the year, there were so many assignments and they kept on coming, which made this issue worse. But there is kind of a silver lining since it forced most of us to learn time management skills, like how to set up a to-do list and what to do if distractions become too much of an issue, like installing software that blocks the social media sites, which for young students is a very valuable lesson, considering many of us haven't really dealt with it before. Another drawback, like a lot of other people said here, was the lack of social interaction, which, although I can deal it with, was a pretty big downside. Things like in-class discussions, impromptu conversations, club meetings, after-school activities, as well as so many other things, are necessary and I feel natural part of school life, and that just didn't exist in online school. It made the experience not as enjoyable and added to the lack of motivation, as well as deteriorating some people's mental health. Especially since many of my peers did not turn their face cams on.
Wow. Does anybody want to ask anyone any questions? My question to all of you is if anybody wants to start with this one, is mental health, that we hear a lot as policymakers about the impact of lockdown on young people's mental health. And I wondered if you all seem remarkably resilient and engaged. And I just wonder if any of you have any friends or are feeling that that's really been an issue for your peers. Who wants to go first?
For me, like for my school, we had a special time duration, it was just one class where one of our teachers spoke about mental health and that what chair we should use, how our setup should be, all of that got checked. Then he told us that at the maximum you should stare 45 minutes, at constant 45 minutes at your screen. Then you have to take a break for at least 15 minutes and then we can come back. So we had to follow that so that we wouldn't go like more. Plus, there have been researches conducted on rats where if you show them a flashing light or some other type of light, then they get addicted to it. And if you make it into a lever situation where every time they pull the lever and they get that light, they'll constantly do it until they eventually forget to drink or eat and die. So it can get really severe.
Okay. Anyone else want to ask any questions or share anything about how that
I can talk about.
Let's go to Annika and then Aadya.
Sure.
Okay. So for me personally, I go to a school that has a boarding school. So for some of my friends in the boarding school had to go back to their home countries because of the pandemic. So a lot of them, because they're so used to being in a school environment surrounded with people all the time, they kind of missed it when they went back home. And I felt like that was a big deal for them because they're surrounded by students for almost 2/3 of the year, and that changed. And I think that really affected a lot of people's mental health. But we always have each other to depend on. And we had a lot of, like Sterling, in our school, we also had a lot of reflecting sessions and forums where we could give like feedback on what we thought was going well and what we thought should improve. And I think that was really helpful. But I actually had a question for Aadya, which was when she talked about theoretical learning, I wanted to ask if you had any lab-based assignments as well, because I know for a fact that I had those. And for me, those units had to be postponed to next year so that we can actually go to school and do them, because otherwise, without the lab-based experiments, we can't actually learn the topics, which is a bit of difficult.
So if I can answer that, my situation was exactly like yours. We were supposed to have lab experiments, especially for everything related to sciences, which has been postponed to whenever the school opens. And right now, even though the teachers are trying to show us videos of the actual experiment, I mean, it's nothing like doing it yourself. So I think that has really been different and not so pleasant, I'd say.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to draw that conversation to a close because I'm going to wave my magic wand now. You all into the Minister of Education for your own country. So as of now, you are the Minister of Education in your country, and you are now going to share with the rest of us your thoughts on the basis of this conversation about the pros and cons of online learning and how lockdown's been for everyone. I want you to share with us, when it's all over and you're designing the education system for your age group, what changes would you make to the way that you're educated when the COVID crisis is over? Or would you go right back to the way things were before, with that working beautifully for you? So if I can go to the Minister for Education, please, in Singapore. Can we hear what the Minister would say in Singapore?
So I think I would embody the same mindset as Aadya mentioned before, which is that virtual classes cannot compensate for the physical aspect of learning. The whole school experience is really students to interact with each other socially, and it allows for group projects, team spirit, collaboration, which is all important aspects of learning and cannot be ignored, because they build enthusiasm, motivation, interest in different subjects. So without those, we can't really have school. But I also think that virtual classes has taught us that it's important to allow students to go at their own pace for things. Not every student learns at the same capacity and at the same intensity. So it's important to allow students to have the opportunity to manage their own learning with online resources being shared, videos, the freedom to ask questions and email and ask for extensions if they need to. So I think a mix of both would really be helpful, because I think it would bring a balance in the way of really maximizing what you can get out of your education, in terms of staying interested in learning, but also being able to not get overwhelmed with things to do. Yeah.
So would the balance be by subject or would it be by time? So would you say have half your school day at home and half your school day at school? Or would you just have science at school and, I don't know, languages at home?
I actually think, so when I talk about there being a mix, I think the main issue with virtual learning was the fact that we were all at home, learning independently. I think it's really important for us to learn together, because that's what builds that's what builds our education, really. So when I mentioned that we should balance the two, I meant balancing online resources, in terms of like notes available, videos available, which happened to increase when we went to this virtual learning. So I wanted to mention that we should keep that capacity of having online resources for us to access at any point in time, but also have the social and physical interaction in school, so that we have the ability to learn together, but also learn independently in our own time.
So it's both and it's not either or.
Yes.
Great. Lovely. Now, as an advisor to the government in the UK, I'm particularly interested to know what the Minister for Education in England is going to come up with. So Jonathan, how would you take the learning of this time forward?
So personally, I think the way schools were before, you can't really beat the environment of a learning situation by online, because online, obviously, you can't get to grips with what's going on. If you have any questions, it's harder to ask the teacher. And I think there obviously has to be a balance. And I think that some of the Zoom call and the talking with teachers could be implied actually when doing homework and other stuff like that at home. So you can actually have interaction with your teacher if you're stuck on something. Because sometimes you can email a teacher and it'll take a few days to reply, and by that time the homework's due in. So you need to have an interaction, I think, and with other classmates as well. You can speak with them more about the homework. And as well, I think the online learning could actually be put into some classes, because I go to the second biggest school in the UK, and it's very, there's a lot of people there. It's very crowded at some points. Some classrooms have 35 people in plus, and I think even sometimes reducing that amount and then letting some people stay maybe for a lesson or two a week at home, maybe for an online video class or just something like that, so they can actually learn at home. Because obviously now we've introduced it and it's going well, I don't see why not. And especially with practical learning, though, obviously you're going to have to go into school with that as well. So practicals in the lab, you've got sports as well you'd have to do at school. I don't know, I think there could just be like a equal where they just come together and sort something out.
Great. Okay. Good to know what my new job's going to be. Fatemeh, Minister Fatemeh, how's the education system going to be different, or is it going to be the same in the UAE?
I think education is indeed a very important thing. As we can all see, everything, like most of the things have stopped in the world, except for education. It is still continuing. In any matter, in any way, in any situation, we're just continuing with that. So taking any decision regarding this matter is very sensitive and important, I can say. So I think a combination of both can be really good. For example, we have 5 days a week of school, so 3 can be at school and 2 can be at home. Now here we can create a balance between the 2 days which we get extra will make us more focused on ourselves and our skill development, and the 3 days which we get to go to school will be interaction, and we'll get whatever we used to get back then. Like I think the portions, I think everyone is lagging behind with the portions now. So I think this will create a balance between both self-learning and school learning.
Fascinating. Absolutely brilliant. Right. I love that idea. So, Minister Sterling from Canada, what's going on in Canada under your premiership?
If I were minister, I would probably invest more attention into online learning, since I know from my friends from other schools aren't very technologically empowered. Like by having lessons on a platform like OneNote, Google Drive, or Google Classroom, I believe teachers can better prepare for their lessons and students can easily refer to it at any time they want, particularly if they didn't understand something or they just need it for review. In my experience, yeah, like I said, writing notes is so much better. Homework assignments can be done and submitted there online without any chance of being lost or being eaten by students' dogs. And teachers can easily monitor and access students' work from anywhere easily. Like, additionally, more generally, we never know when another situation like this will happen again. And transferring such a big thing like education onto an online platform will make it more sustainable in the future, I think. Additionally, from my experience, this lockdown has made me realize how terrible my time management skills were, which are so important in the future. And I think this is largely because students are more expected to know them, in my opinion. Moreover, this skill, I believe, can only be learned most effectively through experience, which makes it pretty difficult to address. Nevertheless, it's really important, and I would probably address it by arranging more entertaining workshops and seminars in all schools that work on time management with the students, and maybe some other ones primarily for the teachers and the parents who can use what they learn to guide their children and students. I would also label it a top priority so that schools can recognize that it is a very big issue. And lastly, I would probably invest more attention into the mental health for students. Going into the final semester for me, as well as so many of my other peers, was very challenging since I was all of a sudden faced with so much work. My poor time management skills did not help at all. Young students who are just going into high school, like me, may not be as prepared for the workload ahead, which for me at least was not that great in middle school and below. This may cause some people to feel overwhelmed all of a sudden and cause anxiety and or lack of a motivation like I faced, of course, among other things. And judging from some of my friends and also my own experience, they also may not know how to deal with these kind of situations and keep it to themselves. I would probably implement like coaching more advisors, both adult and students, to help some of these students out. Also, particularly focus on making them accessible as well as welcoming, in the sense that students won't feel any shame in getting help. This might be accomplished by setting up a website for students, for each school, where students can book meetings both in person and online, which could be anonymous. So yeah, these would probably be the 3 major things I would deal with if I were the minister.
Can I just ask you about your That's so interesting. Can I just ask you, Sterling, about your first idea about having lessons on that platform that people can access? Would you only be wanting children to access the lessons from their own teachers in their school, or would you envision, I don't know, like a regional hub or even a national hub or even an international hub where, you know, there's a range of lessons on a topic, say, I don't know, density, and you could take a lesson from any teacher anywhere in the world on that subject, or would it just be more local to your school?
I think it would be better if it was just local to the school, since every teacher has their own style of teaching, and I feel like that's also what makes school kind of school. So I feel like if they made their own personalized lessons for each kind of school and make it specialized for their own brand of teaching, I feel like it would make the teaching more diverse. Yeah.
Thank you. What's going on in Ghana with the new Minister of Education there, Christian?
As minister, I believe that the education system is going to change very much, because in our system, it has the lowest level of technology, coupled with the fact that technology, the subject information communication technology isn't really taken serious in this part of the world, from Ghana to some extent of Africa. So I will make sure that technology is more incorporated into the education system, but not in a hazardous way, not in a way that students can abuse it or use it in other forms of, for example, using the technology to do social media instead of learning. And under my leadership, I believe that students, our teachers would learn to compromise. There are some teachers that, when teachers sort of act like our parents in school, especially in boarding school, but there are some teachers that are so strict, they don't listen to whatever you say. Sometimes, if you've solved a math question in exams, your solution is different, but your answer is right. You can show it to the teacher, explain it to the teacher, you say, okay, but he won't give you the mark. So I think that under my leadership, I'll make sure that teachers can compromise, understand students as they are your own children, understand us as sort of your peers to an extent, so that we can also feel free and be able to put in our maximum best.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Christian. Where should we go? We've got two left. Let's go to Estonia, to Minister Aaryan.
Okay, so going back to the way things were before would mean that we would have lost a valuable lesson. I believe what the Estonian education ministry did during the pandemic was an excellent example of what other ministries should follow. I still have a few suggestions though. First of all, I would ensure that all schools would use one platform that would be approved by the government and maybe created by the students and for the students, with a universal calendar for parents, teachers, and students for better planning and execution. Education ministers should look forward for computer donation programs to enable students with technology. There are nations who are also looking at radio to impart vision, for example, Ghana. Constant feedback from parents and students would also help in resolving issues and streamlining, so we could create another platform for that. I would love to go back to school since it surely gives us the socializing and human bonding aspect. But I would like us to learn all the valuable lessons during this pandemic and have more focus on ICT and digital learning as a part of our curriculum. Maybe even have a combination of such subjects online and some like sports and science labs as offline. I would also like the schools to focus on sustainability goals and global awareness as mandatory topics so that we as students are better prepared for the future. Now, the reason I want to still ensure that there is a platform that we are using is mainly because students who are sick or students who will not be able to attend that lesson could get help from the teacher or catch up with the class. Another thing I would suggest would be recorded sessions. Then students would not want to attend classes, which might kind of give it an unstable.
What a great list of suggestions. I love that the blending, you're all coming up with these different ways of blending the two together. It's fantastic. We're going to end where this whole webinar began, which was with Aadya in India. It was your idea. And so now over to you, Aadya. How would you change the education system, or maybe you wouldn't, in India as a result of what you've learned from your learning in lockdown?
So before I start giving my suggestions, can I just say, being the Minister of Education, wow, what an opportunity. And then, of course, responsibility. So if I was the Minister of Education in India, I think the first thing I would want to do is ensure that every child in the country has the access to education, both in school and online. Because I know that several rural parts of the nation, there are so many children who don't have the devices or the internet connection, which is why they're simply missing out. So my first goal would definitely be, like Christian said, to give them access to these facilities, ensuring that at least their education continues. Then, of course, things like meeting face-to-face and the, like I said before, implementation of our learning out in the field cannot be possible in prevailing situations of a lockdown. Once things do start opening up, I as the minister would propose that all schools should use a combination of online and offline education for the perfect balance, ensuring a good mix of theoretical and practical knowledge, which was, of course, like everybody has said till now. Also, now that the teachers have got used to using technology, we mustn't stop the flow and should continue using that skill wherever possible along with the classroom learning. I would also really want to focus on reducing syllabus and rote learning, and in fact encourage all schools to have a system where students are able to actually implement everything they learn into their practical everyday lives. And lastly, I would encourage that rather than overloading the students with several sets of examinations each semester, we have fewer examinations along with more of outcome-based assessments, which would also help us along with our life ahead. All in all, we must make sure that the purpose of education is that it is accessible, interactive, relevant, and yet at the same time fun, to ensure that all students get to increase their knowledge, but then also become happier, more caring individuals and grow as humans.
What a great way to end. Thank you, Aadya. Now we've got 2 minutes. I'm wondering if you've all heard what the other ministers have come up with. Is there anything that anyone else has suggested that might change what you think you would like to do in your country?
Yeah.
Go, Jonathan.
I think what Aaryan actually suggested with the people that are off sick, maybe they've got an illness, they can stay at home and actually maybe watch the recorded classroom, or actually do an online class separately and actually learn that way. I think that's a good idea.
Great. Anyone else?
Yeah.
Adding on to what Aadya said, making education more accessible, along with my point about like encouraging to make education more online based, probably investing more in electronics and making internet more accessible all over the country.
Also, I think something that a lot of people said was about having mental health advisors who can be students and also teachers, maybe students a little bit elder, or maybe someone who's gone through the same thing and now recovered, so they can help the person out. So I think that's a really good idea.
For the theoretical part, for the offline learning, I would engage in more of practicals, because it's like that's the part of education we are missing in my school. There's hardly, the only theoretical parts I know are chemistry, but we do we are supposed to do practicals in integrated science, biology, and physics, but it's sort of missing. So I'd also make more practicals.
I think what Sterling said about having webinars about how to conduct online classes is quite a good idea, because I think there has to be some type of consistency between schools of like what is expected from a teacher, what is expected from a student when we do these virtual classes, because we want to make sure that we're maximizing what we're getting out of online learning and in-class learning.
That's great. I'm so sorry, it's the end of our time. It's the end of our time. We're going to be cut off quite soon. I want to thank all of you. You are truly an inspiration. If you're the future is bright. And I thank you all for your time and for your participation and for your thoughtfulness. And I wish you a happy and safe easing coming out of lockdown, and all the very best for your future learning. I am things from all of you. You're amazing. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.